We're up to 13 now. Do you have any announcements before we start?
I don't think so.
Okay.
You can let them know that it, well, you don't have to let them know it's being recorded because I told them they had to be here now. So we've got one person who had to work and she couldn't make it.
Okay. Actually,
Oh, just one thing for you. Keep in mind that these are master's students. And that if you give any examples or anything, try to keep it in the upper, master's level, and that they'll probably be going into jobs in nonprofit and government. So you can use that in your examples.
Okay.
Okay.
Will do.
I should have sent you an email on that.
That's okay. I have one example showing them how to tailor their job description. It's a job description. It's at TikTok, but it's a social impact associate. And like the previous experience that they're looking for is knowledge of non-governmental organizations. So I figured it was kind of nonprofit themed, even though it's not. I don't think TikTok is a nonprofit, but
No,
it's still like they still want that.
it's not by any means.
I know.
They're making big bucks.
Yeah, but it's focused on social responsibility and like working with stakeholders and NGOs.
Yeah, okay.
Good to know. Okay, so we have 29 right now. We're expecting 40.
You should end up with, if everybody's on, you should end up with 46.
Oh,
But,
okay.
You can let them in anytime you want. You don't have to wait.
Okay. All right, I'm just gonna practice sharing my screen before I bring them in though. Let's see.
Do you have any videos embedded in your?
No, I don't have any videos.
Good. All right.
So we don't have any, because I know sometimes just audio issues. I'm scared to risk it. So
yeah, that's why I asked, because there is a little button you have to hit for that.
Right.
So it's just share, then click on what you want to share, your PowerPoint, and then share again. There you go.
All right.
Beautiful.
So are you able to see that I just switched?
Yep, it looks lovely.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to start letting the students in. We have 37 right now.
Good. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Maura. I'm the one that's sending you all the annoying emails.
And I'm Aaliyah Castleberry, and I'll be walking you through this resume presentation today. So we'll give it a couple more minutes for people to join. I'm just managing the waiting room. We're almost at capacity, so we're almost going to get started. One more. Okay, so we can get started and I'll just manage the waiting room on my own. So my name is Aaliyah Castleberry and I'm a career coach within the Center for Career Development. And today I'll be talking to you all about resumes. I'm providing an overview of resumes, but also going deep into some bullet point statement writing. So feel free to utilize the chat, have some conversations, but also if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to put those in that chat and then I'll go over those at the end of this presentation. So here's our agenda, going over basics, then we'll talk about some categories, going into those bullet point statements I mentioned, and then talk a little bit about what exactly makes an effective resume. So with the basics, what is a resume? So really it's a document that presents the most critical and relevant information to a reader or reader or an external audience. So this is honestly like one of the most important one-page documents that presents yourself in the most professional way you possibly can. So that that document really highlights your educational background, experiences, their skill set, but really you're trying to get whoever it is that you're sending this resume to understand who you are, the experiences that you have. But really the purpose of a resume is to get an interview. So really just conveying your skill set in kind of like a broad sense. And then once you have that interview, that's where you really get to shine and add additional information so that they really get a thorough understanding of who you are. So usually it's one page. It can be 2 pages, especially in your industry in the field of public policy. 2-page resumes are okay, especially because oftentimes you might have a lot of internships, some professional development, maybe some presentations. So all those things will go into those categories, but it's okay to have a 1 or 2-page resume, just making sure that whichever you have, that those pages are full of information that really presents you in the best light. So there are 3 types of resumes. So the first is a master document. So if you don't have a resume at all, I really recommend starting here because from here, you're going to be able to really divvy out and create those other 2 types of resumes. So with your master document, it's really everything that you've done as far back as you can recall. So I probably would recommend starting with like your first year of undergrad and then going up until the present time. So this is only for you. There's no page limit. It truly is just everything that you think could be potentially relevant, positions you've had, student organizations you've been a part of, really just thinking like, what is everything? And then from that, you can create an industry-oriented resume. So this is adapted from that master resume that has everything on it, but really it's tailored to the industry you're interested in. So if you have experiences that are most relevant to public policy, that's probably going to be your industry-oriented resume where you only include those experiences, the knowledge, the skills that are relevant to that field. So that one can be for yourself, but can also be for an external audience, such as an employer, or if you're applying for a PhD program one day or additional education. So that one's also typically 1 to 2 pages. Now, when you can also have a specific position resume. So this one is always going to be tailored to a specific opportunity. So if you identify a position that you would like to apply for, this specific resume is really going to focus on really thoroughly understanding that job description and pulling out the different skill sets that they're looking for, the different requirements, and really just trying to identify what key pieces of information are they looking for that they feel makes you an ideal candidate. So if you're seeing them writing a lot of communication skills, critical thinking, those are things you're going to highlight in this resume. So same thing, 1 to 2 pages, but really the difference between this resume and, the difference between a specific position resume and industry oriented is that the industry oriented one is more so just broadly. And yes, these slides will be available to you all for reference after the presentation and is also being recorded. So you'll get the link to this as well. So those are there are 3 different types of resumes. No problem. So now we'll talk a little bit about resume categories. So there can be some discrepancy as to like exactly how many categories you can have on your resume, but really that decision is up to you. So the key main things that you will always have to have on a resume, no matter what, are your contact information. So we want to know your name, your address. However, the address is really becoming kind of like hit or miss. So for instance, if you're applying for a job in California and you don't want them to necessarily know that you might be relocating because you might feel that that might, I guess, like disqualify you or feel like you're going to be a difficult candidate to onboard because they might see like, oh, we might have to pay relocation costs, whatever the reason may be, whatever you're worried about, just considering that and to whether you include your address or not. Usually it's fine to include that regardless, but I just know that that's becoming more so like a mainstream thing is for some people to not include that address, especially when you're applying for more remote positions. Also, your phone number is important. An email address that you check often, so you can keep using your UConn email after you graduate, but if you're not going to be checking it consistently, you might want to choose another professional email address. Now, your LinkedIn profile is optional. I do know a lot of individuals within the public policy field network with LinkedIn, so it might be helpful to have a really thorough, nicely built out LinkedIn profile, so then you can include your URL here. It's really an extension. It can be kind of like serve as an extension of your master resume per se, but when you include that link, you give the employer, whoever you're applying to, the opportunity to kind of like understand more experiences and learn a little bit more about you before you get to that interview part. Now there's also an objective statement. So this is optional, really completely up to you if you would like to write one. However, if you do have an objective statement, you want it to be very specific to the position or the industry you're applying for. And we'll also go into depth about each of these categories. Now, education section is one of those mandatory sections. So you always want to have both of your degrees listed there. You can include some relevant coursework. We'll go into depth about that. Experience you should have, however, the title of your experience section can really vary. So if you would like to have a category that says nonprofit experience or an analytic experience or data analysis, whatever it might be, depending on the types of roles you're applying for, you can really name those experience categories whichever you choose. So just keep that in mind as well, but should have some sort of experience on your resume. Now, bullet point statements, we'll also go into those as well as to how to write those and really make those as efficient as possible. But those should be under each of your experiences. However, you see under the work experience section in this category, there are no bullet points, which is okay because, those experiences probably aren't super relevant to the positions this person's applying for. So because of that, they don't want it to take up too much space on the page, but they would just like to show that they have other work experience. And then this other sections category, really depending on the experiences that you have. So this can range from computer skills to campus activities and volunteering, study abroad experiences. It can be extracurriculars. Really, these other sections can take any other shape that you would like, but we'll go into depth about all of this too. So contact information should always be at the top, very first thing on your resume. So went into this a little bit already, so I won't spend too much time on it. But that's the typical format. You don't have to necessarily have these dots in between. It doesn't need to look exactly like this, just making sure that you have all of this information right at the top of your resume. Now, this is where we get into the objective statement. So if you're going to have an objective statement, I recommend that it's almost as specific as possible, because otherwise, if you leave it broad and just mention like, I'm looking for a full-time position to use communication skills, that doesn't really add anything to your resume. And really the purpose of this objective statement is another opportunity to sell yourself a little bit more. So you can specifically name the position or title you're applying for. You can mention the field, the industry, or the company, really depends on you. And then also you want to include 2 or 3 transferable skills that you have that are relevant to the position. So going into this a little bit later also, but this is where if you're seeing a couple of skills really being prominent in that job description, this is a great opportunity to highlight that, especially because it's the first thing on or second thing on that resume. So they already know that you have that skill set, and your resume is really just kind of additional information to showcase those skills. Now, transferable skills are abilities, attributes, or personal qualities that you can possess that can be used across industry lines. So whether you're in, communication, you're in the nonprofit field, really, no matter what, these skills can usually be applied anywhere. And those are some examples. So a simple objective statement, and I actually found this position on LinkedIn. So this position, the objective statement states to obtain a full-time position as a policy analyst for the National Skills Coalition, demonstrating research, organizational, and communication skills. So the reason I wrote this as specific as I did was because in the job description, they mentioned research a few times. They mentioned organizational and communication skills, and those seem to be the 3 most important skills that they were looking for. Now we'll focus a bit on education. So with your education section, always want to include your university, the location of that university, the degree that you earned there, the major, and the month and year that you graduated from there. So you don't want to include ranges. So from August 2018 to May 2022, whatever that might be, just including the month and year so that they know when you intend to graduate. So I would recommend removing high school information, especially because you're all master's students at this time. We don't want any of the high school information on, especially because you probably have a lot more relevant experiences through your undergraduate and graduate experiences. Also in this section, you can list your GPA, any honors or scholarships that you have, as well as relevant coursework. This is also where you can list study abroad experiences. And if you do, recommend the same formatting. So this is just a few examples. So the first one is how you can list your bachelor's degree. Also, some majors have concentrations. So if yours had a concentration right under Bachelor's of Arts, you can include the concentration. Same for your graduate program as well. You could also include relevant coursework under either of those sections as well. I would say if you're including any relevant coursework, I would say choose maybe 4 or 5 courses that are upper level and that are most relevant to that position once again, because that's another opportunity to showcase that you have that experience, especially if you feel like you might be lacking in directly related experience in that field. The relevant coursework section is a really good opportunity to demonstrate an additional skill set because you have the knowledge, even if you haven't necessarily applied it in a role. All right, so now we'll talk about those experience categories. So these categories should list your jobs or positions that you've held, and they should always include 4 pieces of information. So we call this the core 4. So you want to include the company name, the location of it, your title, and the time period you were there. Also to mention, with experiences and activities, you want to make sure that each experience within your category is listed in reverse chronological order. So present experiences should always be first in that section. So for instance, looking here at Webster Bank, if I had an experience that I had most recently, where I literally just started last month, I would include that above Webster Bank because that's present, whereas this concluded in August of whichever year that might have been. I know that can get a little bit confusing, so feel free to put in the chat any questions you might have. So kind of same thing down here with this activity, really listing the activity, your position, the school, location, and those dates that you were part of it. So also, once again, we'll go into bullet points later, but with each experience, you can have as many bullet points as you want, but I probably wouldn't recommend any more than 5 because after 5 bullet points, it really kind of just gets very long. So I'd recommend like having maybe 3 or 4 really strong bullet points as opposed to 5 bullet points. Now your skills. So your skills section is a really great opportunity to demonstrate the different skill sets that you have. So these can be hard skills, they can be technical skills. Oh, sorry, I got one question. Let me go back. Should you list all your jobs, all your recent jobs, or the most relevant jobs? Fantastic question. So I would say really depends. So that's where having that master resume and the industry oriented resume might come in handy. So absolutely, if you feel like all of the positions you've had are relevant, or if you don't have enough, like you're trying to fill a page and you feel like there's some experiences that might not be relevant, but you like the page kind of looks empty, that's perfectly fine too. Because also in those positions, you can really focus on different skill sets. So you might get skill sets within a nonprofit internship versus working in a grocery store. So you really just want to focus on developing a well-rounded skill set. So I would say really depends. I hope that answers your question. How would you recommend showing a different position in the same organization? Great question. So I think with that, I would probably say right under this last bullet point, you want to include the same, like the new title or the different. Okay, so like the older title, I would say. So same thing. So most recent position would go here. And then under this in italics, same formatting. If you were customer service representative, including those dates there, having your bullet points. So you don't want to list it as like a completely new experience. I would just say like kind of like sublisting it, but keeping the same format as this title so that they know that that is an additional title that you had. And also when you have your resume critique appointment, we can go into more depth about it and really kind of assist you in crafting that. And how would I recommend doing bullet points for both? I'll save that until a little bit later. No problem. So skills section can really be kind of what you make it. So this is a great place where you highlight your technical and hard skills. So you don't want to include these soft skills such as communication, teamwork, critical thinking. We'll go into where those fit in later. But really those technical skills that we can measure. So some certifications that you have, such as CPR, Microsoft Word, you can also categorize within your skills section. So listing computer, Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, certifications, and listing those. Really go with whichever you feel looks most professional. And yeah, I probably just stop at that, whichever you feel looks most professional. So some of those additional sections that you can have. So these school activities, if you were involved in any research, community involvement, this is an example as to how you can, like if you were, for instance, like a chemistry major in undergrad, and you participated in research, this is how you can list that research experience. So really the same formatting as your work experience, just the addition of the topic section, but still having those bullet points conveying what you did in that experience. Yeah, honestly, the same thing. So just keeping the consistent formatting, consistent dates for these additional sections. So I know I hinted to it a lot. So now we'll go into that, into writing bullet point statements. So what are they? So they are 1 to 2 lines that describe what you accomplished or what you learned in a certain experience. And it really allows the reader to understand how that experience relates to the one you're applying for. So I'll go into a little bit further depth as to like how exactly to showcase that, but this is a great place where those soft skills such as critical thinking will come in. So some guidelines, so they typically begin with an action verb such as fundraise donations by or manage or designed. On our resume and cover letter guide, which I'll put the link in a chat, and a little bit later, we have, I believe it's on page 7, we have an entire list of different categories of skills that you have and how they could potentially relate to a position that you're applying for or skill set that you're trying to show. So I think that's a really good resource. I'll be sure to put that in the chat before we're done today. So they don't contain personal pronouns. So oftentimes people might write like, I was responsible for this, or we did this. Really don't want to include that. Always should speak in third person. And make sure you pay attention to the tense. So if an experience is completed, you use ensured and speak into the past, versus if you're continuing to work in that experience, it's present. So your current internships, make sure you're speaking in present tense throughout the entire bullet point. Okay, so a little bit more guidelines. So I would say don't write a bullet point more than 2 lines, because when it gets to 3 lines, it starts reading like a paragraph, and then I think sometimes the employer might lose interest. So kind of like an overarching thing with resumes is you always want to make sure it is easy to read. That is your entire goal, is to make sure that your resume is easy to read and that it communicates your experience and skill set in a professional manner. That's it. So don't focus too much on making sure each bullet point is completely extensive and explains thoroughly exactly what you did. Really just figure out how you can make that into a really strong 1 to 2 line statement. You want to quantify and add numbers wherever possible. For instance, if you supervise people, you you made presentations, you conducted benchmarking research, whatever that might be. If you can include a number, that's always going to be great. People love reading numbers. Our eyes automatically go there. So anywhere you can quantify, I highly recommend doing that. Also, bullet points are a great place to expand on the details of your tasks. So you can include some of those platforms that you use. So if they're in your skills section, this is also another place where they can go as well, to provide some context to how you completed a task. So an example of this bullet point is collaborated in a team of 4 interns to research new media opportunities, focusing on athlete development and market penetration versus help with marketing campaigns in different departments. So you recognize that one is much more comprehensive. One has a number, which is always great because people want to know how many people you supervise, how many people you've worked with. So thinking about unique ways that you can incorporate that. Also, even just this first bullet point can be what's what I'm looking for, I guess, enhanced by adding the platform that that person collaborated on with, those like how they create those new media opportunities. So really can make it more thorough and extensive, but want to make sure you don't get carried away incorporating every single last detail. So I think before I get into this, I want to answer Danielle's question about how would you recommend doing bullet points for both. So when you have two experiences, when you have two positions within the same employer, I would recommend highlighting the parts that were different. So when you get a promotion or you have a different position, usually something's a little bit different. So if there's a skill set that you haven't necessarily shown in one of those positions, I highly recommend focusing on that for the other. So you also don't want to be too repetitive. I would say if your bullet points are the exact same, it might be worthwhile just to write each position title on one line. So customer service representative / customer service supervisor, and then just including the bullet points right under that. So a couple of different ways you can do that. But definitely ask that question during your resume critique, because I want to make sure that I'm not just broadly speaking to your specific situation. So when you are developing bullet points, the first step is to think about the skills needed for the experience you're seeking. So great opportunity to just do some overview searching into different job descriptions. So think about where you'd like to be in a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. Look at some of the, actually, no, I wouldn't say 10 years. I'd probably say like a year or two. So I'd say look at some of those positions that have availability. Look at those qualifications and identify some of those skills. You might even want to print some, highlight some of those keywords, because you want to get in tune with the language that they're speaking in the field. And you also want to showcase that you have those specific skills. So this is an example. So I think this is a great step in just identifying what exactly do you want to convey. Don't think too much about the experience that you don't have. Just think about the skills that are required for the industry that you're going into. And chances are with these transferable skills like communication, critical thinking, problem solving, organizational, you'll have those. It will just take a little bit more creativity as to how you might convey those if you can't connect it to a task. So the second step is to develop those bullet points. So writing each bullet point is a 3-step process. So you want to include what you did, how you did it, and why you did it. So the what you did is usually what I would say a lot of people have as their bullet point, is just what they did. Now, how you can enhance that is including how exactly you did that. So whether that's using those communication skills, Microsoft Excel, Qualtrics, whatever that might be, adding in that how part so they know exactly how you completed that task. Now, the why part of it is, what was the end result? Why was it important? Who did you impact? It's less about like, I did this because it was my job, and more so about, I completed this and this is the impact that I had. So for this specific example, I'm honestly just workshopping this out loud. So I have no idea how this is going to sound, but I'm just going to try it out. So I think combining this example, I would probably craft this bullet point to say, give presentations through communication, teaching, and managing time effectively to educate undergraduate students on resume writing and answer questions about career development. Now that should be 2 lines, but if it's 3 lines, I'd probably look to cut out some information in that why part of it just to make it more concise. So I might say something along the lines of to educate undergraduate students on career development or something along those lines. So that's really how you can enhance each individual bullet point. So not like you have 4 experiences under like 4 bullet points under experience, but really each individual bullet point should have each of these 3 components. So I know that can get a little confusing. So if anyone has questions or you want to talk through one of your examples, we can do that at the end. But let me know if you have any questions about that. So third step, building your bullet point, which is kind of exactly what I just did. So this takes like a 2 to 4 star method. So a 2-star would be give presentations about resumes to undergraduate students. That's technically a 2-star because it doesn't include the why part of it. The second one for 3 stars is lead presentations on resume writing for first-year students utilizing verbal communication. So great, now we know what they did, we know how, but we still don't have the why part of it. And then the 4-star bullet point, which is the best one, educate first-year students on resume writing by leveraging interpersonal skills to facilitate effective presentations. That's way better than what I workshopped and said, but that's a great way to really make it concise and specific and to the point. So you might need several drafts, completely fine. We'll work on that with you in your individual resume critique and employment because we know it can get kind of confusing, especially with the words, like how you rearrange them. So don't be too intimidated by bullet points, but they might be the part of your resume that takes the most time. So some more examples. So a good bullet point would be conducted heavy recruitment, doubling membership in the organization, not too specific. Better would be responsible for mentoring 6 students to help them improve their academic performance. A little bit better, but what does responsible mean? I recommend not using responsible because especially if you were employed there or working there, we know you were responsible for whatever task that was. So probably just starting off with mentoring would be great. And then I think the best one here would be maintain regular communication and conduct. Oh no, I did exactly what I told you all not to do. I used present and past tense. Sorry, attention to detail, my bad. So we'll just switch it to past tense since a lot of it is in past tense. Maintained regular communication and conducted weekly meetings with mentees about programs, services, and resources, which contributed to academic success. So that's really comprehensive because we have what you did, we have how, and we also have the why part of it. So that's about bullet points. So now we'll go into having an effective resume, and then we'll go into some questions. So general rules, 1 page for undergraduate resumes, but you're all graduates. So having a 2-page resume is great. Also, if you're applying for higher education past this, understand that some universities may require a CV, which is a curriculum vitae, which really is kind of serves like a master resume, but highlights your research and teaching skills. That's a whole nother presentation for another day. But resumes are fine to be 1 to 2 pages. Margins on the side and up above, you want to keep to 1/2 inch to 1 inch. Font size can be minimum of 10.5 to 12 font, mostly because you have no idea what they're reading this on, if they're reading it on the computer, if they printed it, what's going to be able to read, but this is a pretty safe range. I would say your name should be larger than 12. I'd say make your name like 14 or 16 because we want them to remember your name. That's one of the most important things. You want to use a common and consistent font. So if you begin with Times New Roman, make sure you're writing with that throughout. Being consistent with formatting. So back to my earlier point is you always want to make sure your resume is easy to read. So you'll see in this example, all the dates are on the right side. You see each header is bolded and underlined, which is great. The position or the companies are all bolded. The positions are all italicized. So really going for consistency. Avoiding some abbreviations. I know UConn is a University of Connecticut can be a lot to write out. But I would recommend, highly recommend writing out University of Connecticut. Where you can't, UConn is okay, but just make sure wherever you can that you write that out. Don't use a template, really, because you risk your resume looking like someone else's, but also sometimes when you're adding in information, it just gets very difficult to keep adding because the template really keeps you within a certain box, or you can't hit enter sometimes. So I'd recommend, if you've used a template, to open a blank Word document or Google Doc, whatever you choose, and really just start typing in this information. I'll also put the link in the chat to our sample binder, which shows you samples of resumes. Avoid typos. Don't rely completely on spell check. So way to do this, just go through your resume, read it out loud. It might be easiest to catch things. So a little bit more about having an effective resume. So really, the resume tells the employer a lot about your professionalism and increases your chances for gaining an opportunity, an interview. So that's the purpose of being specific about what you're looking for. So it's your responsibility to demonstrate how your experiences, connect to every specific job or that you apply for. So looking for those keys within that job description, which we'll go into next. But it's also important to remember that a successful resume has to demonstrate the experiences that match what the employer needs. So even if you haven't had that exact position, that exact experience before, I promise you've had something remotely similar. And it's really just about crafting your experiences and your bullet points to convey that appropriately. I've seen a small identifying picture included in the header next to your name. I've seen a small identifying picture included in the header next to your name. Do you recommend? So I think you're referring to a picture on the resume. So I would recommend any pictures or any graphics on your resume. For any, I can't think of any reason why, unless you're applying for, like, I don't know, dramatic arts or acting roles, and they kind of like utilize your face to cast roles. But I would not say in a professional setting, it's typical to include a picture or an icon or any graphic of sorts on your resume. I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, feel free to follow up. So, okay, great. All right, so when it comes to tailoring your resume, so this is a position I found at TikTok. Just found it today actually on LinkedIn. So you want to review the job description. So what I do if I were applying for positions is I print out that job description and I highlight everything within that job description that I have done. So I also highlight the keywords and skills that they're looking for as well. And I might highlight those in a different color if I've also had that skill or that experience that they're looking for. So this job description is for a global CSR, social impact associate for TikTok. So while it's not a nonprofit, it is focused a lot on having a knowledge of NGOs and also social impact and corporate sustainability best practices. So looking at this job description here, we'll go into the qualification section. But if you're not finding too many skills in that section, I would say look into the responsibilities, but really focus more of your efforts on the qualifications. So here we see they want 5+ years of experience in social responsibility programs. So instead of saying like 5 years of social responsibility programs, you're demonstrating that through the time that you have on your resume. So that's where your date ranges come into play. You might mention social responsibility more. You might reword some of your example or your bullet points to say actually social responsibility so that they don't have to be like, okay, well, it looks like you only have 2 years, or maybe that's social responsibility. Like you don't want them guessing. You really want to convey that. Also, they want someone to have experience designing programs for a global company and workforce. You can write that too. I almost recommend like adding some of these words specifically. So strong analytical skills with a high degree of attention to detail. You can include that in your bullet point. So you're trying to get as close as possible to demonstrating that you are the best person for this position by highlighting those qualifications, because we don't want them to guess. We don't want them to figure it out. It's our job to convey that to them. So that's really what you're looking for in a job description, is you're looking for some of those key skills that they're looking for. Now some action steps. So I mentioned before our resume and cover letter guide, which I'm putting the link to that in this chat. So that really is comprehensive. So it speaks to everything I talked about today. It goes over bullet point statements. It goes over categories on your resume. It goes over some of those transferable skills that you could have. Super comprehensive guide. At the end of that, it has a cover letter guide as well. It's like 3 or 4 pages, but super helpful if you're writing cover letters as well. Link to this is the second link is going to be our resume sample binder. So that's where you can go through and see samples of resumes. We have some industries listed there. We don't have like public policy written out, but maybe service experience or social sciences might stand out to you, or research experience for each of those sample resumes. But know that just because these are sample resumes for these industries, it doesn't necessarily mean your resume needs to look exactly like this. So I would recommend probably glancing through, seeing which resume looks most efficient, really professional, and communicates what you're looking for. And then I would say categorize your resume based on how you feel it looks. So wouldn't say copy it verbatim. Once again, avoid using that template, but really want to make sure that you're focusing on how you can present yourself in the most professional way possible. And you're all going to have your resumes critiqued as well in the upcoming weeks. So that's already great that you're doing that. So yeah, definitely recommend reviewing these resources, but also just looking on our website. We also have some videos. If you learn by hearing, if you are an auditory learner, we also have videos on resume writing. So here, I'll put the link to that in the chat as well. So this is a link to all of our resume related resources overall. But I think that's all I have for you all today. So thank you so much for your time and your attention. But now completely open to questions. So if you have any questions at all, you can feel free to unmute yourself or just put it in the chat, whichever you're most comfortable with. Okay, good question. Should we include our forthcoming master's degree if we are fast track student under education? Great question. So I would say yes. So yes, because that's education that you're currently pursuing. So you'd list your reverse chronological order as well. So you list your master's degree first, and then second, you list your bachelor's degree. So I would definitely recommend using that, because they also need to know that you're still in school, you're still pursuing an education, and when you intend to graduate, because you don't want to wait to apply for schools just because you don't feel like it's like going to be efficient for you to really communicate that on your resume. So I definitely recommend listing that master's degree under education. That's a really good question. Any other questions that I can answer? Of course, happy to help. So I'm just going to hang out here for a bit, answering any questions that come up. But if you don't have any questions, we're all set today. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and best of luck with everything that you're going to be applying for in the future. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for having me. Oh yeah, absolutely. Email me here. I'll put the link in the, I'll put my email in the chat for you. Okay. Yeah, definitely can email me with any follow-up questions. Yeah, of course, no problem. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.